Hi, I'm Robbi Eklow. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and we are in my studio at the Hot Chops Art Center in North Downtown Omaha.
What compelled you to make this artwork, and what led up to its creation?
So in 2010, I had neck surgery, and I had to spend about 4 months in this collar that they, like if you see people in a car accident, it was a Miami J collar, and I couldn't move my head. So I sat there for 3 or 4 months in my studio at home in Illinois at that time, just doing, it was before Zentangles, but I was sort of doing like Zentangle shapes. And so I did those for months and months, and then I saved them. And then at some point, I decided to turn it into a quilt. So I had it photocopied. I had done a little postcard, so I had it photocopied and blown up, and I turned it into a quilt pattern. And then I named it Red January because I was really mad about something some January. And then it turned out that I was mad about things every January for quite a while, so I just left it the name. And I worked on it, and I didn't finish it until last year. So I finished the top several years ago, and then it just kind of sat. And then I couched over the edges a year later, and then it sat, and then I finally quilted it and submitted it to Quilt National.
Why do you think you're angry every January?
Well, it's cold. And there were political things that were making me mad. So that's why.
Was this quilt part of a series?
Oh, that's an interesting question, which I should have known. So usually I work in a series, and I have made other quilts out of these drawings that I did. So it's sort of a series, but I don't have it numbered or anything like that. But I plan to do more of this style where I'm couching over the edges of, it's all fused and hand-dyed, and I'm couching over the edges of the shape. So I plan to do more work like that. It was a lot of fun.
What is your background with art?
Well, I've taken some art classes, but mostly my college degree is in engineering, but I've been making quilts for about 30 years now. So my background in art is just that I've been a quilt artist for 30 years, and I have a studio, and so I take it very seriously, but I enjoy it too.
Where do you find inspiration?
So because of my engineering background, I really like math, but I like applied math. So when they first came out with CAD, I took some classes, and I was designing quilts in AutoCAD in class when everybody else was designing construction stuff. I was designing mariner's compasses that had 53 points, because AutoCAD can do that. So I like to play with numbers and have things going around in circles, and do mathematical things.
Okay, what references did you use in creating this artwork?
I didn't use any references at all. This was just me sitting there with a felt tip marker and then filling in this little piece of fabric with acrylic ink that I was putting in a technical pen. And I just did it on a postcard size piece of fabric. So no references for this one.
What technique did you use?
Well, for the quilt, I dye my fabric, and normally I use paperback fusibles. In this case, I had a lot of Misty Fuse that I wanted to try. So I printed the shapes of each section. The quilt has, if you look, there are circles intersecting circles, and then they make sections. And so each kind of wedge shape I made that part first by printing or tracing, I can't remember how. I got it on parchment paper, and then I ironed that onto the back of my own hand-dyed fabrics that had the Misty Fuse on them, and then cut them out, and then made the quilt top, and then I couched over hand embroidery threads with a number 40 polyester thread that matched the number 12 cotton thread, and covered the edges so that I think the black squares that are in it are not covered. I think I forgot to go back and do that. And so I had that, and then I quilted it on my long arm, and then it was done. Oh, and I used polyester embroidery threads to quilt that also.
What problem did you solve along the way, and how did you do that?
One of the problems I had is that the parchment paper that I was using, it was cooking parchment, and usually it doesn't stick to fusibles the first time you iron it on. I mean, it'll stick, but you can pull it off. Then, if you have to iron more things onto it, it starts losing its ability to release. So by the time I got the top done, it was sort of coated in paper that was stuck to it. And that was one of the bigger problems, was just having the patience to sit there with the seam ripper and work the seam ripper under the paper and pull it away until most of the top was just fabric. And then some of it, I just said, I don't care. Nobody's going to see the inside. So that was one of the problems. The other thing was when I was doing the couching, I used a zigzag stitch, and I used a plastic foot that had a hole in it that I ran the embroidery thread through. So the couching is when you have one thread, and then you're stitching down on top of it. So it's like a tunnel. And it was hard to turn corners. And on this quilt, there were some really spiky corners, like this. And so finally I had to just let go of the perception that things had to be perfect. And I just wanted to enjoy making the quilt and not worry about everything being perfect.
What makes this artwork special?
Well, I worked on it for a long time, so I had a lot of emotion into it, I think. And so far it's the only one that is not really based on rotational symmetry. It's more abstract. So, and it got into Quilt National, so it will now forever be my Quilt National quilt. And which was really delightful, because I was in Quilt National 20 years ago, so it took me a while to get back in, so I'm excited about that.
Cool. Do you feel less angry about January now that it's done?
Yes, I do.
All right. Anything else you want to say?
Just it's a big honor to be in Quilt National. I think a lot of people don't know what a big deal that is. So I'm really excited about being back in, and I've encouraged other young art quilters to apply. And I used to own a catalog for every single Quilt National, and at some point I gave them all away to a friend of mine who's an art quilter to encourage her to be in Quilt National. So I just think Quilt National is a great thing, and I'm delighted that it's there. Oh, and we moved to Omaha from Chicago, so now we're near the Quilt House, which was also built by the same people that have been sponsoring Quilt National. So I'm calling it the International House of Quilts, and it's one of my favorite places to go. So thank you.